What up, Entourage? Welcome to the 2020 wide receiver review, and we're going to talk about who could possibly be the next Jerry Rice moving forward for the 2021 redraft, as well as Dynasty. You don't want to miss this, guys. Let's get into it. All right, guys, yesterday we did the 2020 running back reviews. If you haven't already, make sure to check that out. Today, we're going to go over some wide receivers. And like running backs, there was some busts, there was some breakouts, less injuries than the running backs, but there was still a couple of guys that, let's just say, they didn't live up to expectations. Well, like we did with yesterday's video, Entourage, we're going to go based on ADP, where were they selected, and we're going to compare that to where they ended up. All right, so the consensus number one receiver was Michael Thomas. Oh man, did he let us down. But, injuries happen. He still played good, even with Taysom Hill for the few games he played this year. So I do like his prospects moving forward, and people are going to have recency bias. They might drop him some. I won't be one of them. He is quarterback proof. He is going to get targets. So I actually like Michael Thomas a lot moving forward, and he's a beast. He's a beast. He's going to come back stronger than ever. So if you're in Dynasty, I would be buying. And if you're in redraft, if you could get him anything outside of maybe the top one, I would still have I had Devonta Adams one this year. I was in the minority. I'll have him one next year, but Michael Thomas would be my consensus too. So, if for some reason people want Tyreek or somebody like that, I get it, but Michael Thomas will definitely be number two for me. Number two ended up being number one. My number one, Devonta Adams. I mean, you can't say enough about this guy. This guy is a PPR machine. He is so consistent. I just can't believe the year he had, because people forget he missed a couple of games as well. He only played 13 games, so he missed 2 games and still was the number one receiver and averaged 26 points per game. That is insane. Great value there. The number 3 selected receiver ended up finishing number 2, Tyree Kill. He's been a lot more consistent. He also, no, he didn't miss a game. I'm sorry. I thought he missed the game. But he's been really consistent, which has been the knock on him. They said he had blow-up games. He did have some blow-up games, but he also had a pretty safe floor as well. So Tyree Kill will probably be my number 3 receiver. And for being a speed receiver, he's been super reliable and the opposite of injury prone, which is not something we often see. He's still young, so and he's going to have his quarterback for several years to go. So Mahomes signed like 10 years, so he'll have him for the rest of his career. So definitely like Tyreek's prospects moving forward. Number 4, Julio Jones. I warned you about this guy. Listen, there have been great 30-year-old receivers, but it's not common. And when you get that age, and when you've taken the amount of abuse that Julio has on his body, being such a big body receiver, he's subject to more hits. He also has crazy speed. So you're more likely to get injured, to pop a few things. And he was a big bust. And I can't say I'm that surprised. Now, when he played, he was effective. But he's somebody I would be looking to sell from Dynasty, and I would probably be avoiding based on where I envision him going in the 2021 redraft. Deandre Hopkins was the 5th receiver off the board. Now, he started like a bat out of hell, kind of faded, but he still gave you good returns as he ended up being the 4th overall receiver. A lot of people were concerned about D-Hop. He definitely proved them wrong. Now, the year before, I think he was 1 or 2, so didn't quite live up to that, but I think he actually had more points, as we had a fluky 2019 season where wide receivers didn't really, average as much as they typically do. D-Hop, probably also dynasty sell. I think he could continue this. He could probably even improve on those numbers slightly, but he is starting to get up there in age, has never suffered a career injury, and not to, put any bad omen on a player, but typically I've done this before where I've predicted these things, and I don't do it to wish bad on a player, but It's just the facts, guys. Most players will suffer a major injury in their career. We saw it with CMC. I remember Greg Olsen was Mr. Iron Man. I told you guys he's Mr. Iron Man, but I'd be weary once you start creeping up there in age, because more than likely you are going to get a big injury. But I will say this about D-Hop. Kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth, because he's not a Julio where he has to rely on his size and physicality, and he's not insanely fast. He runs like a 4 or 5. I'm less concerned about D-Hop. But again, if you're a dynasty owner, he had a big season. I'd rather get rid of a player a year earlier, because even 2 seasons ago, I predicted maybe Julio can fade, and he made me look bad, even though it really was that last stretch of games where he totally blew up when Falcons were out, Austin Hooper and Calvin Ridley. But still, from a dynasty perspective, I'd rather get rid of these players a year earlier at maximum value, start getting some draft picks, start getting some younger guys, so you can always be ahead of the curve, okay? After Julio Jones, or after D-Hop, we had Chris Godwin, somebody I was particularly high on. Now, he was better than people think when he was on the field, but he had some injuries. And unfortunately, there was just so many mouths to feed in Tampa Bay. I mean, we knew, you had Mike Evans, but then Gronk had a bigger role than expected. The running backs, Ronald Jones was a lot better. And then they bring in AB. So Chris Godwin, he had a pretty decent floor, was pretty consistent, but didn't have the upside that we would have liked for somebody being drafted that early, because there was just so many mouths to feed. However, I like his talent. Being in the slot, he'll continue to be consistent. And if you're a dynasty owner, I would be looking to buy low, since, he disappointed a lot of owners. I think you could get good bang for your buck. So he's somebody I would be targeting in dynasty. And I would also be looking to draft in 2021, because I don't think he's going to go as high as his potential could be. All right. Right after Chris Godwin was teammate Mike Evans. Mike Evans, I wasn't as high on him as most, and he still didn't live up to his ADP, only slightly. Let's see, he was the 7th overall receiver taken, but he finished 11th, which is actually higher than I thought. I thought he was going to be like a high wide receiver too, and I love Mike Evans. That's the player I drafted almost every single year I'd been in fantasy, but my main concern was because Brady was his quarterback. Brady doesn't really go long that much, but Mike Evans had a ton of touchdowns. He got more targets than I expected. He did have a couple clunkers, but that happens to everybody. So even though he let down from an ADP perspective, he exceeded my expectations. And you can't be mad if you still got a wide receiver 1, even if he was the 7th overall taken and ended up being 11th. So Mike Evans, really nice season once again. That guy is just an Iron Man. He takes a lot of hits too, but he has missed very few games in his career. This was a big bust. I expected big things out of Kenny Golladay. I should have known better, to be honest with you, because he has had a little bit of an injury history. He's another one, plays kind of reckless. He's just so talented. He's subject to a lot of hits. And unfortunately, he missed most of the season. So I don't know if I'm looking to buy low on him. I mean, I like his talent, but injuries are a concern for me. So if you got him, you don't want to sell him low. But at the same time, he's not somebody, and he's older than people think. Like, he's, I think, 27 already. He feels like he's younger, but I don't know. He's probably like in that he's like the wide receiver Joe Mixon. Like, they got a ton of upside, so you don't want to sell him cheap. But at the same time, the injuries are a concern. So I put him right now as a hold, because you're not going to get much for him, and you don't want to sell him cheap. That's how I feel about Kenny Golladay. DJ Moore was a bit of a disappointment, to say the least. The 9th wide receiver drafted. He ended up finishing 23rd. So low wide receiver too, Robbie Anderson ended up being better, which was quite a surprise, to be quite frank. It just goes to show what a mess the Jets were. He was one of the better values. Even though most of his points came earlier in the season, he was still gave you a pretty decent floor. So DJ Moore Probably somebody I'd be looking to buy low on because his talent is definitely there. So I expect better seasons, especially Carolina. I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is the long-term answer. Maybe they'll have him another year, and I will be less thrilled about that. But DJ Moore, don't be surprised if Carolina gets another quarterback, and I think his better years are ahead. The number 10th receiver, Allen Robinson. This guy just continues to ball. Let's see, he ended up being the number 7th receiver. So back-to-back wide receiver ones. I believe he was 7th last year as well. So Mr. Consistency. Imagine if he had a quarterback. Love Allen Robinson. So obviously he gave you good bang for your buck. Odell Beckham. Done with him. I've been done with him. Told you guys to stay away from him. Kevin Stefanski, running team, injury history. What happens? Exactly what I said. So OBJ is somebody I would be looking to get rid of. Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper, what hurt him was that Dak got injured. And even after Dak got injured, he was picked as the 12th receiver, and he ended up being 14th. I think you're pretty happy with those returns, especially he had some big games early in the season, was pretty consistent, more consistent than I thought he would be with Andy Dalton, especially since they have Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb. So Amari Cooper continues to prove me wrong. I've always been a skeptic about him because he's had, he's faltered on the road and he's faltered in big games, but seems like he just keeps getting better. And I also was a little concerned about his injuries because it seemed like he was one of those guys that was always banged up, but he always plays through it. So Amari Cooper definitely impressed me. Him and Mike Evans were two guys I wasn't particularly high on that exceeded my expectations. 13th, this guy just continues. I don't know why people keep down him. All he does is be a PPR machine. I'm talking about Adam Thielen. Once again, wide receiver 1 was chosen as a 2, third round. Ended up giving you kind of like that low first round, high second round return. Was a top 10 receiver. Was selected as a 13, so he continues to do his thing. Juju, man, everybody knows how much I liked Juju. I thought he would just get a ton of targets. That wasn't the case. He had a better second half, obviously, but it was just weird how they used him. Now, Juju, there are more talented receivers. Actually, he's probably the 3rd most talented receiver on his team after Deontay Johnson, who I absolutely love. We will get more into him. I loved him in addition to Juju, so it wasn't like I didn't like Deontay Johnson, but I didn't think Deontay Johnson would be the number 1 receiver there. I also didn't think they would only use Juju in like little 5-yard passes. Like I said, he turned it up later. He was a red zone threat, but overall, he did not live up to that 14th value, and somebody I even said could be top 5. That didn't work out too good. Cooper Kupp also, it looked like he was the Cooper Kupp from the second half of 2019. Robert Woods was clearly the number 1 receiver on the Rams offense. Robert Woods ended up being a wide receiver 1, just made it. So he continues to be consistent and was a tremendous value as he was selected as the 20th overall receiver. A.J. Brown, 16th overall receiver. He missed some games, and he ended up being the 16th receiver, 16th best receiver at the end of 2020. But that's despite missing 2 games. So he would have been a wide receiver 1, I believe, as far as points per game. So he was somebody I was high on. Another player I was extremely high on and I rapped about was Calvin Ridley. Wow. 17th receiver taken overall, ended up finishing top 5. Love him from a redraft, from a dynasty. He could definitely continue to be a top 5 receiver. And then you got right after him, Corlyn Sutton was a complete dud. 18th overall receiver selected. Maybe could have lived up to that. Don't really like his prospects moving forward with now you got Tim Patrick to compete with. You got Jerry Jeudy, who I expect to be a lot better. They'll definitely bring in a new quarterback. I'm pretty sure Drew Lock is not the answer. So not sure how I feel about Corlyn Sutton, even though I do love his talent, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens and who they bring at quarterback. Number 19, Keenan Allen. Boy, did he ever deliver. Now, the problem with Keenan Allen, though, he was an absolute beast. But like Keenan Allen, lets you down when you need him most. And I hate players like that. And that's why I've been lower on him the most. But 19th overall receiver, you can't be mad. The way he tore it up, he had huge games, 30 points, 25 plus, target monster, him and Herbert. So, he'll probably be overdrafted next year as far as my liking. Because, again, he always lets you down, and he's not getting any younger. So if you're a dynasty holder, I would be looking to sell him high on this season, but you still can't be mad at the returns. Despite missing some games, he ended up being the 9th best overall receiver, and you got him at 19. Robert Woods, we talked about him earlier, 20th receiver selected, 12th receiver overall. Got to be happy with that. Tyler Lockett is another guy, seems to always end up, he wasn't a wide receiver 1, but he was a wide receiver, just missed being a wide receiver 1, was the 13th best overall receiver. He's somebody that, I don't know, I just don't like. And, well, I do know, he's very inconsistent. So, yes, he ended up being the 13th receiver, but his games were like blow-up games, and a lot of them came early in the season, and then his second half was abysmal. So, not the type of player I like. His final numbers are always there, like I said, just outside wide receiver 1, but a lot of that came early in the year, and a lot of that came in just a handful of games. So, really not my type of player, but, the final numbers are there. However, with the emergence of DK Metcalf, I'm not sure that I like his prospects moving forward, so I'd be looking to sell. His teammate got selected right after him at the 22 spot. He also tallied off, but DK Metcalf was an absolute beast. Great season for him. And, it's just the Seattle Seahawks offense. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's because Chris Carson got injured or Russell Wilson just puts these disappearing acts sometimes. But you got to like DK Metcalf from a redraft standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint. So I would buy DK Metcalf if you can, and I would sell Tyler Lockett, which we discussed earlier. DJ Shark. Man, he was one of my biggest disappointments. Outside of Juju, DJ Shark was somebody I really had high hopes for. I thought with Jay Gruden, he'd get a ton of targets. Despite, I never liked Minshew. No, the reason I like DJ Shark had nothing to do with Minshew. A lot of people had him as a sleeper. I did not. I saw the tape, did not impress me. But I thought they could overcome that. Because Jay Gruden feeds his receiver. Jacksonville will be down, but DJ Shark, I would buy him at the right price from a dynasty perspective, but he also has been a little injury prone, so that's a concern. But I think because he has so much talent, when the Jacksonville bring in Trevor Lawrence, that's going to be a big boost for his prospects moving forward. So I think you could get him at a cheap enough price from a dynasty perspective where he's worth the buy, because I think the injury risk will be factored in. So nevertheless, DJ Shark was a bust and a buy at the same time. T.Y. Hilton, I told you guys to stay away from him. He had a couple good games later on in the year. Where did he finish? Let's see here. I got to scroll. He finished as the 42 receiver overall. You selected him as 24, so obviously I was right on that. Terry McLaurin was somebody I was big on. Let's see, you selected him 25th was his ADP overall. He ended up being, he tallied a lot, but I think that he still ended up giving you a return. Now, I thought he could be a lot better. I thought he would probably finish top 15. And you know what? If he had good quarterback play, he'd probably be top 5 to 10. That wasn't the case, but you're still happy with the return. Despite being injured, despite, tallying off the second half, he still finished 22nd, so you can't be mad at that. And ahead of DJ Moore, who, people selected 9th. Devante Parker was somebody I was avoiding. Obviously, he wasn't too good. You selected him 26th, but the guy right after him. Wow, Stephon Diggs. He was somebody I was like, Stephon, this guy is like a borderline wide receiver 1 every year. And you had him 27th just because he went to Buffalo. But then again, Josh Allen has a stronger quarterback and is fit, tailor-made, which I rapped about, for this offense. And you had him 27th. Obviously, he was arguably the best draft pick in the entire draft. Finished 3rd overall, was picked 27th, behind guys like Devonta Parker and T.Y. Hilton. Jarvis Landry, obviously, didn't do much. 28. AJ Green, told you. All these guys I told you to avoid. Jarvis Landry, AJ Green. Marquise Brown was a huge bust. Wasn't, too excited about his prospects, the way Baltimore runs their offense. Michael Gallup, I thought would be a lot better. Tyler Boyd was somebody I was pretty high on. He obviously gave you good returns. 32nd receiver chosen overall. Where did Tyler Boyd end up? He ended up 28th. So I thought he would have been better if Joe Burrow stayed. But still, you got him 32nd ADP. He gave you 28th. Cole Beasley, wow. He ended up being 21 overall. Solid wide receiver too. And he was chosen 69th. Oof. Both Buffalo receivers exceeded expectations. Who else we got here? Deontay Johnson finished 18th overall, just behind Juju, actually. Juju, you know what? He actually finished 17th. He finished better than I thought. Obviously not. He was selected as the 14th overall. So actually, Juju wasn't as big as a bust as I thought. Maybe for me because I had higher expectations. But anyway, just noticing that Deontay Johnson was definitely a value. He finished ahead of Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp he was kind of busty. CeeDee Lamb, rookie, 20th, didn't even have his quarterback. He was a wide receiver 1 when Dak was there, so he's definitely a dynasty buy and redraft. Chase Claypool, just outside of wide receiver 2, and he's the wide receiver 3 or 4 to start the year. Gotta love that. Curtis Samuel had a good year, finished 26, exceeded expectations. T. Higgins. Now, T. Higgins, I didn't see this coming. I thought T. Higgins could possibly be a bust. I thought he had some upside because of Joe Burrow, because of Zach Taylor, but T. Higgins is a stud. I would be doing everything in my power to buy him. And luckily, you could probably still get him as a decent value because Burrow got injured and he kind of fell off. But T. Higgins is a beast. Love T. Higgins. Somehow Marvin Jones always ends up being, in that wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. If he hadn't missed some games, he would have been a wide receiver 2. I believe he was in points per game. Ended up being 29th. Will Fuller did he didn't do what he always does because this time, instead of injuries, he took PEDs, which is probably why he didn't get injured. Will Fuller is definitely a sell, especially you could probably still get good value based on how he performed when he was healthy. Brandon Ayuk, future star, love his prospects. Have no faith in Debo staying healthy. That guy's injury prone. Corey Davis exceeded expectations, ended up being the 32nd overall receiver. Nelson Aguilar, another guy who kind of been a bust. Both him and Corey Davis, similar situations. Players that you had more expectations on earlier in the career. And they both, compared to what we expected out of them, they delivered. Jamison Crowder, points per game, probably would have been a borderline wide receiver 1, but he does what he always does, which is why I tend to fade him. But he had some big games while he was healthy, ended up being 35th overall receiver. Even ahead of guys like Marquise Brown, Michael Gallup, Chris Godwin. All these guys were predicted to finish ahead of him, although he was slightly ahead of Godwin in points per game. So he averaged 15, Godwin 14.6. That's what I'm saying. Godwin was actually pretty solid when he played. Darius Slayton, that was somebody I was a lot higher on. I don't know what's going on there. Jason Garrett sucks. Daniel Jones sucks. More so Jason Garrett. That Giants offensive line sucks. Very disappointed in him. Very disappointed in Judy, but again, has to do with Drew Lock and his quarterback play, I think, more than anything. Who else? And then, of course, let's talk about the future Jerry Rice. And I'm talking about Justin Jefferson, guys. Arguably the best rookie season ever. Finished 8th overall, 1,400 yards. This guy almost exclusively played the slot in college. Now, it's one thing to move from the outside to the slot, but to move from the slot to the outside and do what he did on a running offense with another stud receiver and do better than Adam Thielen, who finished top 10 himself. Wow. So, Justin Jefferson, the reason I compare him to Jerry Rice is because he's not overly fast. He's not this physical specimen, but that man runs some routes. And he just knows how to get open. He's deceptively fast and quick. He's big, he's lanky, he catches everything. And like I said, the number one thing you want from a receiver is his ability to get open, which is what he does. This guy is always like, his separation's ridiculous. So I love him. I don't care who's the new coach in the Vikings. I was huge on Jefferson even before the draft. Why? Because guys, there's just gamers. There are players that go beyond the tape. And if you look at his college career, his biggest games came against the toughest competition, Alabama, in the playoffs. This guy was getting 200-yard games and multi-touchdowns. Like, the bigger the stage, the better he got. So at some point, it doesn't matter your combine. It doesn't matter that you're in a slot. You're just good. And he is good. He is great. I love him in redraft. I love him in Dynasty. I just love Justin Jefferson. I loved him before. I love him even more now. And wow, that was the pick of the year. 48th receiver taken overall. So that's like what? Like wide receiver 5. Ended up being 6th best overall. And then we mentioned Robbie Anderson. He was another pick that was very solid. He ended up being a top 15 receiver, and he went couple picks after Justin Jefferson. Robbie Anderson was the 54th receiver taken overall. Cole Beasley, 69, was a wide receiver 2. T. Higgins, 74th receiver taken overall, was a wide receiver 2. But I mean, those were I think a little less predictable, but we had some valleys, and that's why, receivers, you could always get receivers late. Running backs, you got to get them early. Now you could get the stash backs late that sometimes come on in the season. James Robinson, somebody I forgot to mention yesterday, but for the most part, you want to concentrate on running backs because receivers, you can get some values. We see it every year. So anyway, guys, that concludes my wide receivers in review. If you have a comment down below, or if you have a question, I should say, regardless of the topic. Also, if you're into bets, I told you guys on my running back review, this is a crazy deal. The whole playoffs through the Super Bowl, you are going to get 5 or 10 of my best bets and player props and my DFS lineups for $50 the whole 5 weeks. I think it's 5 weeks. Yeah. All right. Or 4 weeks. Yeah. I don't know. You're going to get it, though. Entire playoffs through the Super Bowl. So make sure you email me, DM me, comment, whatever. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at fantasyfootballrapper, on Twitter at IamFFRapper. Email me, fantasyfootballrapper@gmail.com. Love you guys. Until next time. Peace.